Welcome to the Grow As We Go podcast. I'm Sam, breathwork and embodiment coach, muse, and self-growth junkie. Here we create space for natural, vulnerable, and deeply connecting conversations on life as it happens, wisdom that I've picked up along the way, and tools to truly enjoy this beautiful life you've been given. I want to appreciate you for being here, whether this is your first time or you've been here since the beginning. We love feedback here, so leave your thoughts and takeaways from this episode in the review section of this podcast. This also helps the podcast become a bit more relevant in search reviews. Another way you can support this podcast is by following me on Instagram at Samantha__Charles and take a screenshot of this episode to share it on your social media and share your takeaways so that your junkie friends can come and get their fix too. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Grow As We Go. Today it's just me, Sam, and the title of this episode is Pussy Plaster Your Way into a Better Life. I'm going to add a little bit of context. If you are not familiar, I have been facilitating yoni casting workshops for women, and they've been like, okay, hold on. What's a yoni what's a yoni? And then what's a yoni casting? I'm sure somebody out there is just like, what are these foreign words? So yoni is a Sanskrit word, and it translates to like holy space or holy temple. And it's also a word used for the vagina or the pussy or the labia, like the whole thing. And that's one of the things about that particular word that I enjoy using along with pussy, which I'm sure that word is triggering as well. I've found that there are not very many words for that area of the female anatomy that are not triggering for somebody. I know pussy has been used like really vulgar. It's been used and it comes off as very vulgar or like crass, and it's also used as an insult a lot of the time, which I find oddly ironic, and probably won't dive into that in particular this time. But I read a book called Pussy, A Reclamation by Regina Thomas Shore, and I can link that in the show notes as well for you to check out if you've not read it. That book really transformed a lot of my thinking around, first of all, the word pussy, what it means to be a woman, and helped me reclaim my relationship to my feminine energy and what it means to be a woman, and like embracing the inner goddess, and honestly like set me along in this path, I think. So that was like a huge catalyst book for me, and it just really transformed a lot of things for me in being a woman, and highly recommend it. I've gotten, anybody I've recommended it to has enjoyed it, and so I highly recommend that book. Again, I'll put that in the show notes for you. If you're not familiar with Mama Gina or that book at all, definitely check it out. Because that's one of the things, like one of the first things that she talks about in the book too is like, why that word? Like, why pussy? Why? And her book is called Pussy, A Reclamation, which I think is really awesome. Like reclaiming that word, because like I said, it's often used in really vulgar languaging or in a negative connotation, and just very like, men will say like, oh, you're a pussy. I mean, men and women, people say like, oh, you're such a pussy, or don't be a pussy, like as if it's a bad thing, a negative thing. And it's really interesting to me that it is such a thing, because all of life comes from there. She is incredibly strong. I mean, she gives birth. She provides like endless pleasure if we can tap into that. And, anyway, so that's my little thing about that. But So that's about that word, why pussy, and why I use that word as a form of reclamation and like making it not, I think whenever we speak about things, and I've talked about this on several other episodes of the podcast, whenever we talk about things and bring them out of the shadows and into the light, then they become less taboo, or they become less like just naughty, you know what I mean? And so yeah, that's why I use that word. And then the other word that I use also is yoni. And the reason I choose those two over like vulva or vagina is because like anatomically they're more correct, because vagina technically is only like the canal, you know, and like the inside of our anatomy, and then the labia or the vulva are just the external. And so it's like pussy is like, encompasses, pussy and yoni to me encompass all of her, as well as like her essence to me. Anyway, okay, so yeah, and I really appreciate that like yoni is the reason I use it for the casting sessions that I do, the workshops, is because yoni provides like a really sacred and ceremonial and like honoring essence and energy to it for me. And because it literally means holy temple or holy space, and like where souls are birthed into this world. And so that's yoni. That's my my tangent about yoni and pussy. And then so the yoni casting workshops that I do are where we literally will take a molding of women's vaginas or women's pussies and get like their unique structure and make a mold of it, and then create like the template, and then we'll put the plaster into it, and that creates a casting. And so yoni casting. Yeah, so I've been creating these for like the last 6 months or so, and I shared it at a women's workshop. Like I shared about it on my Facebook, and somebody was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome, like I want to do this. And she does a lot of workshops, so I reached out to her and we ended up doing one together. And we did the workshop together, and the women there, it was like a really, really beautiful experience. And I wasn't expecting it to be as like impactful for me as the facilitator as it was, because I was like, oh my gosh, like this is the work that I'm meant to bring into the world. I'll just give a little backstory also. So like, how the hell did I get into this? Like, what a random fucking thing to get into. So I follow this girl on Instagram. I followed her for a few years. Like I found her during 2020, and we had similar viewpoints about the whole thing. And then I found out she lives in Australia, and I was like, man, this is wild. But her name's Tamara, and I'll put her link in the show notes just so you can see what she's about if you're curious. But she does body casting, and she also does yoni castings. And I'm like, man, this is so cool. And like to hear her talk about it, I was like, man, I wish somebody did that here. And that was like several years ago. I never thought like, I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like that just sounds like a lot of labor and a lot of, it wasn't of interest to me at the time. And then like I keep seeing her stuff and I keep thinking about it. And then I saw that she has like a DIY kit where you can order the kit and do it for yourself online. At home. And I was like, oh, that'll be cool. And so I ordered it, and the kit like just sat in my garage for a while because I was in the middle of, renovating my studio, and it kind of got lost. And, then I ended up having a separation, and like it just got lost in the shuffle for a little while. But then I had it again, was thinking about it. It just would come to me. It's so fascinating the way these things just, remind you and keep knocking on your door, right? Little whispers from the universe. And so I decided to do it, and I actually had my partner now like help me with it. Like you can do it yourself, but it was like the first time. And one of the things that she says in her instructions too is like to set it up and make it like a ceremonial experience. And I wasn't expecting that. Whenever I bought the kit, like I just wanted to have a statue of my pussy that I could put on my altar, like and support in that, like reclaiming my relationship to her, and like releasing the shame and just loving her, right, for who she is. I have an episode about ditching shame. It's episode 18. It's called Ditching Shame for Better Sex and More Freedom. And I dive into that a lot, and I have several posts on my Instagram, and it's kind of become like my thing. I feel like, where it's like there's so much shame that women hold in our bodies, and I dive into that in that episode number 18. If you want to check that out, it has become one of the most popular episodes, and it's like one of the more recent ones. So that's really, really cool to see that that one taking off, because it is something that I'm incredibly passionate about, like liberating women from that, like just shame that we harbor and hold in our bodies and in our hips and our womb and our yonis. So that's what like the reasoning and the why behind the yoni castings is, like supporting women in reclaiming their relationship to their body and just a whole new level of self-love, basically. So I got the kit from her and asked my partner if he would do it for me, and he read all the instructions and got it all set up, and as he's reading it, her instructions were to like light some candles and set an intention and ask your pussy if she's okay with you doing this. And that was like the first time I had ever really thought to like communicate with a part of my body in that way, and particularly with my pussy. And it was really, really interesting, and like to sit with that energy and to see what came up. And like she was like, hell yeah, which is funny because that's what a lot of like the women who come to the yoni casting workshops, or whenever we do this. So, and I set it up very similarly whenever I host the workshops. It's like very much a ceremonial, an honoring. It's very like intentional and with a lot of purpose. It's not just about like the end result. And so we do this exercise, right, where we do a lot of different things, and I'll get into that in a minute. But one of the things is asking permission, and so we asked permission, and I thought that was really interesting. But it, again, just like brought up some stuff around like, how many times have I not asked permission? How many times have I like had sex when I kind of didn't really want to, or forcing things a little quicker than maybe she wanted to because of this, that, and the other. So that was really sweet. And then it was also really interesting too to be like receiving, and I plan on creating a whole episode about that, but there are several others about like my journey to receiving love, receiving like anything from the universe, receiving compliments, receiving attention. Receiving has been a challenging thing for me to like bump up against, and there's going to be more episodes around that. So, but one of them that I wanted to share is actually, let me see. So it's episode 15, which is a part 2 of like a big piece of my story. And you don't have to listen to part 1 in order, like you can just jump into part 2. But that one is about like opening your heart to love. And I've shared a bit about my journey in that as well. But I feel like the yoni casting was like, again, a catalyst to, just like the pussy book, a catalyst to my journey, and like realizing I had this wounding around like receiving love, and like, man, has it opened up a lot of really interesting, lessons over the last like 9 months. So yeah, and I'd like to use this analogy for like my experience of receiving a yoni casting. A long time ago, whenever I did my first boudoir photo shoot, I did so with the intention of like having it done for my partner. And when I got the pictures back, like, and even like during the experience and the way that the photographer was like, encouraging me and sharing really kind words and like pumping me up. And then I got the photos back and it was like, wow, this experience was like so much more for me than I anticipated it would be. Like, I set out with an original intention of like it being a gift for my partner, and it was so much more for me than I ever expected. And that's how I feel about this yoni casting experience as well. And, I think a lot of other women do like have that similar experience where they're like, yeah, they'd like to, women actually, they come for a lot of different reasons, but the ones that come because they would like to have like the end result of the statue of their pussy, I think it becomes like, a much more healing experience, right? Like, wow, I didn't realize that. And then there's the element of sisterhood when we do it in a group setting, and it's just I just really, really love it. So yeah, there's that. And then after I did my own, I was like, man, this is really cool. And I shared a bit about it. And then, like I said, I was going to start hosting workshops, and went to do that with a friend of mine. And the first time I did many, many rounds of experimenting and like getting the concoction and the ratios of the different like, products that we use to create these magnificent creations. My lovely sister-in-law was my guinea pig and did many, many yoni castings on her. And it was funny, at one point, it was like me, her, and my mom that I was like working on and facilitating and just like practicing, right? And I was laughing so hard thinking like, wow, I don't think there are many, if any, other families where it's like you would have a mother, a daughter, and a daughter-in-law all together doing stuff like this. Like, what a life, what a blessing. And so, yeah, I really fall in love with this work, and there's not only repairing the physical relationship that women have with their pussies, and there's just so much shame held there. And like I hear that in the workshops, there are women talking about like being made fun of because of this, that, and the other of their appearance, like their lips are too long, or like somebody had shared also like having had labioplasty for that very reason, because her partner like didn't like the way it looked. And it's just really interesting to me, and it's also really heartbreaking as well that like, this part of our body in particular, I know people get like plastic surgery for various different reasons, and not to shame anything, it's all part of the journey, but I think particularly when it comes to the yoni and like how sacred I have come to view her, and just the honoring and the respect that I have for her, the ability to bear children, to bear great pain, and to bear great pleasure. Like, it's just this really, really amazing portal between worlds. And for it to be criticized and judged in such a way that somebody would physically alter her, it's really heartbreaking to me, and really is the reason that I'm here and doing this sort of work that, like, I think can maybe be seen as a bit extreme. And I mean, that's kind of how I live my life, in the extremes, or in the taboo, and just not following the status quo, and just like, I feel like I've always been a black sheep in many, many ways, and like the things that I'm interested in, and a lot of them are against the grain and a bit extreme, and I've had to come to terms with that, right? Like being different in that way. But the point is that I really appreciate this work, and I appreciate all the opportunities that I have to facilitate and join with other women and create a ceremony, and to share my journey, and to be a part of their own healing journey with their bodies, and that they can shift from like their pussy is just this thing, right? That like it bleeds sometimes, or it smells sometimes, or it has different discharge, and all these different things that happen within it that have been deemed like negative or shameful, or things that we're not even like don't talk about, like having different pH imbalances or hormonal imbalances can have like it's such a delicate little place, but it's also like incredibly strong. Anyway, I feel like I'm going on a rant about this, but it's just to be a part of the journey and to support women shifting out of like shame and disgust, even through a ceremonial experience, into having love and respect and like reverence. And then also like even further beyond that, right? Like having more curiosity around her, and like how you can support her, how you can develop a relationship with her, how can we release shame so that we can have more pleasure in our lives. Like she is the source of that, right? The pleasure and the life force energy that is like the fabric of all of our existence. Everything in this world, including us and life, like animals and plants, but also even like, this microphone or this desk, or, you listening to this on your phone, or the paper in front of us that we write with. All these things are created essentially through that sexual life force energy, or by somebody who was created by that. So it's like everything, it all comes down to this life force energy that she is like, the icon for. And if you're a male, then your cock is. But I find her particularly interesting and particularly worthy of the respect that she doesn't get, because she is literally a portal between worlds. Like she births children. Anyway, it's so easy for me to get up on these like tangents and da. But another thing too is like, I feel like if you heal, so all of that to say, like, she's the most shamed part of any human body that there is. I talk about this in that episode 18 that I referenced earlier, where we have so much sexual shame as a culture. And women have a lot of body shame. I know men, experience that to some degree as well, but I don't see it as prevalent as it is in women. And then, so you combine like the body shame with the sexual shame, and like the yoni is the most shamed of them all. And so I believe that if you can begin to heal your relationship with the most shamed part of your body, then the rest will fall. And it's like a, rip the Band-Aid off sort of technique. And I believe that if you can, it's almost like the root cause sort of analogy. It's not exactly the same thing there, but it's like she's the most shamed. And if we can be fully liberated from that and be in authenticity in how we show up and in this world physically and also like sexually, and just being able to express ourselves fully, then we have no more shame and we're free. And so that's like a big value of mine also. It's also a way to honor the divine feminine and have, this replica of your yoni that you can have on your altar, and you can have on like a sacred space that you have, your bookshelf, what have you. It's been really fun. I have like a group chat from all the women who have participated in these workshops, and they'll share like where theirs ended up. And I love seeing like where these women are like showcasing them, and like some of them are in their closet, it's not quite like wham bam, like right in your face, and it doesn't have to be. That's not the point. For some people that's what makes sense, and for some people it makes sense to have it be more of a private liberation. And again, like I think it's all part of our own individual journeys, but the divine feminine and honoring her. And in the workshops I always start off with like an sensual embodiment practice to tap into that femininity and awaken that life force energy. And like that's what a lot of my healing has been about in the last year, is about like really tapping into feminine nature and what it means to be a woman. And I have another episode that came out recently about like kind of my story and my history of that. It's episode 21 called Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better. And it's really, dives into like being in this life, this society, being a part of the society, and the like, anything you can do, I can do better sort of era, like that Mia Hamm and Michael Jordan commercial, where it's like very much about women and men equality, instead of like, no, we're actually different and that's okay. So yeah, talked about that a bit, my journey around like reconnecting to my divine feminine, and like feminine being, because for a long time I viewed it as weak. And so you can check out that episode if that's of interest to you. I think it's a really good one as well. So what the workshops look like, I'll just take you through a brief little like thing. So if it's of interest to you, you could totally join. And it's not like, I think a lot of people come and they're like intimidated or concerned or scared or whatever. But by the end or by the middle of it even, they're like feeling comfortable, and it truly is a sisterhood. And there's so much healing that happens in groups and in workshops that in and of itself is like totally worth coming. But so we start off, typically, it kind of depends now, because I've been doing a lot of collaborations lately, which is like really lights me up. I love collaborating. So if you're like listening to this and you do retreats or workshops and want to talk to me about collaborating, please reach out, because I love working together with other women and who are in a similar like healing space. So way that if it's just me, the way that they've been going is I will move through embodiment, which is like an essential embodiment, kind of what I shared about a bit earlier, but where I'll put on some sultry music, and we slowly like ease into this more feminine, flowy, back and forth way of movement. And it truly is guided by the body, and it's a way of like healing through movement. Really, the body keeps the score. I have episode 16, which is called Trauma is Stored in the Body, and why movement is key to healing. And like talk therapy is only half the journey. which is a really, really solid episode. I mean, I know I've said that about all of them, but like I feel like the ones I'm referencing in this episode are like my favorite ones. And I mean, I guess that makes sense because this is my favorite work, right? It encompasses like all these really, really life-changing topics. And I think a lot of things that people don't always think about, So definitely check that one out as well. So embodiment, and I think that's really, really important. But it also like drops us into our body. We spend a lot of time in our head, and so moving in that way where we can let go of the mind and surrender and let the body lead. So I like to do that, and then we move into the yoni casting. It can be kind of quick. I think I've toyed around with this whole idea, but generally people are totally in for it. I think that people that would be very resistant or hesitant or concerned or, have like PTSD really bad that is like undealt with and it's still very sensitive, that this would not, be for you, right? Maybe taking more an approach that would be like you'd have more time to warm up, right? Like the workshops are like it's happening that day, and then if you were to attend a retreat, then it's like there's more time to warm up and like ease into it and yada yada. But like I said too, it's part of the ritual to ask permission, and if the answer is no, then we get to respect that and figure out something else, like, okay, maybe next time, or maybe you get to take yours home with you or whatever. Like I'm so flexible and so like solution, and like I love solving problems, right? Like whatever makes sense here. So we move into the yoni casting ritual, and I make it very ceremonial. You're partnered up with another sister in the workshop, and we do just like a really beautiful, like connecting, sisterhood, loving, and you take turns giving and you take turns receiving from both ends. So you take turns giving and receiving love and appreciation and words of encouragement, or not necessarily encouragement, but like words of like validation and like the beauty that they see in you. And then you take turns giving and receiving the actual yoni casting ritual. And I'm there the whole time, like supporting and making sure that everything's like technically being done, so that way your yoni casting comes out as beautiful as possible. And then after that, we have a break typically, and we'll talk about experiences, and then we shift into breath work, where I have another episode about breath work, episode 8. It's just what is breath work. I'm a breath work facilitator, and just really love somatic practices, and that's really evident, I think, in a lot of my sharings and what I talk about, the breathwork episode, and then the trauma being stored in the body episode as well. I can geek out about that stuff. But so breathwork is like healing unconscious patterns, and it allows us to just release. It's a huge release. And so we do a short little thing of that, and kind of depending on like if it's just me or if I'm working with somebody, can bring in some other elements, and really flexible about that. And so it's fun, it's really, really fun. And I think why this work is so transformational is because it's in a group and there's sisterhood as well. And so it's healing a lot of those like sisterhood wounds that we have as women. And it's also, like I said, like healing the shame from a very like rooted place, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's really, really incredible. And I think it surprises most people how healing and how transformational it is, and like for a while afterwards, right? And I think like you get to have this yoni casting replica, like statue, if you will, that you get to take home with you, and you can spray paint it, or you can like color it with acrylic paint. We had a woman who painted it. It was like blue and purple, and then she put like white splatters on it, and I was like, girl, that is literally the yoni-verse. Like, that is so beautiful and so creative, and I love that. I have another girl who was gonna paint hers like Mary Magdalene, and I really hope that she does do that, because it was so perfect the way that hers was shaped, and I love it. I love the creativity. So yeah, I think with all that being said, like, I do love it, and I do think it's incredibly transformational, and like everything, it's not for everybody, right? It's very healing. I think it can be healing for everyone, and it's not for everyone. I recognize that there are, people with different traumas, different levels of trauma, and different levels of having healed that trauma, and different challenges that can come up. I personally am trauma informed, and so I do have that throughout the whole process, and that's something that I feel confident and capable of dealing with should something come up. But so far it's just been like a really celebratory experience, and I'm very like intentional, and kind of have become a stickler about like holding reverence for what we're doing, and creating a very sacred and safe space so that it's as peaceful and healing as possible. Yeah. So one other thing I want to touch on is how this like transformation and how these workshops, they seem to like spill out into other areas of people's lives, of women's lives. And it, as I have gone through, doing my own yoni casting, and then that unfolding into like this sharing of that with the world, and not with the world, but like eventually I would love that. I think it's amazing. But like sharing it with everybody and anybody who's open to listening, but also has catapulted me in my like sexual healing and reclamation of, again, that like eros, that life force energy. And that energy is incredibly like powerful. It can literally create life, but it's also very creative in other ways as well. And I have seen like that show up in my own life, and that show up in other people's lives, like the level of confidence that you get, and comfortability in your own skin, and like just the way that trickles down has been really, really fascinating to watch and to experience in my own life, and then to witness in other women's lives, and hearing stories about them having felt a lot of shame in the past, like to the point where you even had like labiaplasty, or just like giving away sex, because that's like the value that you thought that you brought to a relationship, or to anything. It's really wild, some of the stories. But what happens after is like seeing their value. These women see their value. They love their pussy, and in a really like fun and innocent and like playful way. It brings like this childlike wonder to life again, and a vibrancy and a passion. One girl had sent me a kind of a like how it's going, and that she said that she would like, anytime her friends would come over, she's like showing it off, and like, look at my pussy. And, like, they're like, oh wow, that's so cool. And just like it has really healed her relationship with her yoni, right? And like being able to show off this casting, and she was in tears about it because it was just so incredibly healing, the experience. So yeah, I think that's about all I have to share about how to pussy plaster your way into a better life. I think that the reason that I wanted to call it that is, there's lots of ways to make life better. And I think going through the realm of sexual healing and through your pussy and through pleasure is like, it's the most fun way that I've experienced, like I feel like not all healing things need to be like so hard, they can be fun and a little like taboo and like exciting or kinky even, and so yeah, I hope that this episode has brought you some different insight to why people are doing this, why I'm so interested in this and so like passionate about this. If you have any questions or, are curious about how to do it yourself, I'm going to share a bunch of resources in the show notes, but yeah, what's next for me is I plan on hosting more workshops. I have a retreat in the works, actually, that I can put, again, in the show notes. But if you follow me on Instagram, it's probably the best way to, like, keep in contact. I also have a mailing, like, an email list. So I have a lot of different ways that you can stay in contact. But I'm hosting workshops, and I have a retreat coming up in April. Let me look really quick. April 25th, what the heck? April 24th through the 28th. So it's a 5-day women's retreat. It's called Reclamation, the Art of the Divine Feminine and Sacred Liberation. And I'm co-hosting that with a friend of mine, Stacy. So I'll put more information about that also in the show notes. But I'm super excited about that. It's going to be in Sedona, Arizona. I've never been there, and I'm like so excited. But I have that retreat coming up. I have a couple of other collaborations that are like kind of in the works for the spring and summer. But those are probably the best ways to work with me, is just keep an eye out on that. Again, I am based in like Houston, Texas. I go to Austin a few times. The next workshop that's coming up is actually in Austin. But I'll post all the information that you need to know in order to learn what's coming up next in the show notes. And I think I said this before, but if you are interested in like having me come and be like a co-facilitator or just like what do they call that? Like a side piece to your retreat or whatever. I don't know what that's called. An event at your retreat or at anything really, I'm willing to work that out and communicate with that and come up with something that makes sense. I love collaborating and meeting new people and traveling as well. That's like a big goal for me with this whole thing, is like for it to be a traveling thing and for me to go around the States. One of the things I'm working on is actually in Canada. So super excited about that. And, the possibilities for this year and what that all looks like. So thank you for joining in on this episode, and we'll catch you next time. If you found parts of this podcast interesting, useful, or at the very least entertaining, I hope that you'll share your takeaways and tag me on social media or leave a review. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.